Ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
In 1937, in the Tanganyika Territory, Africa, 8-year-old Jill Young is living with her father on his ranch. 2 Africans come by with an orphaned baby gorilla. Jill trades her toys and money for him, and 12 years later, Max O'Hare and his sidekick, Greg, are on a trip to Africa looking for animals to headline in O'Hara's Hollywood nightclub. The men have captured several lions, and they're about to leave when a gorilla named Joe Young appears. Now, this is a 12-foot tall gorilla weighing 4,500 pounds. When a caged lion bites Joe's fingers, he goes on a rampage. Just then, O'Hara gets a flash, and he sees Mighty Joe Young as his big nightclub attraction. He and his assistant Greg try to throw ropes on Joe. Joe throws Max and Greg off like they're toys. He's about to hand them the biggest beatdown of their lives when a grown-up Jill Young stops him and calms him down. The men meet Jill, and Greg becomes smitten with her. Max tells her that she and Joe will be a huge Hollywood hit and will be rich within weeks. Needing the income, she agrees to take Joe to Hollywood. On opening night, Joe lifts a large platform above his head, complete with Jill playing Beautiful Dreamer on a grand piano on top. Following that, Joe has a tug-of-war with the 10 strongest men in the world. He easily wins. Italian heavyweight boxer Primo Carena tries to box with him, but Joe tosses him into the audience. Joe's popularity grows by leaps and bounds, and by the 10th week, Hollywood's biggest nightclub attraction. By the 17th week, Joe has grown tired of performing and is homesick. Later, during the dinner, Greg and Jill express their feelings to one another. Greg agrees to return to Africa with her. In his cage, an unhappy Joe tries to ignore 3 drunks who have sneaked backstage. They offer Joe an open bottle of whiskey. He becomes intoxicated. Taunting him, the drunks burn Joe's fingers with a cigarette lighter. Roaring in pain and rage, he breaks out, wrecking the nightclub's interior. He also smashes the glass of a lion's habitat, allowing the lions to escape into the crowded club. A court agrees that Joe should be shot. Greg, O'Hara, and Jill devise a plan to get him out of California by using a moving van and then a cargo ship. Before reaching port, they witness a tall orphanage engulfed in flames. Jill and Greg help the caretakers save the children. The last group, along with Jill and Greg, are trapped on the top story. Joe braves the raging fire by climbing an adjacent tall tree, carrying Jill to safety, while Greg lowers each child by rope to the ground. One child is left behind, so Joe climbs up again, grabbing the little girl. Max assures Jill that because of Joe's heroism, his life will now be spared. Much later, Max receives home movies from his friends. Jill and Greg are married and living on the ranch with Joe. Joe waves goodbye, along with Jill and Greg, to Max and to us, the audience, who watched Mighty Joe Young from 1949.
This is Jack, and today, as you know, is 1949's Mighty Joe Young with the restored footage that turns red, and we'll talk about that. Coming back is my fellow Kong expert and big-time Kong fan, my brother, when he admits it, Jeff.
Let's talk about Big Joe.
Jeff, have you seen the movie without the restored footage?
I do not think I have ever seen this movie.
First impressions from Jeff.
Well, let's talk about what I liked. We just watched it. It's a really fun story. I felt engaged with the story, involved with the story the whole time. I liked the special effects for 1949. It was really great. I like how they did Mighty Joe Young's face with the white eyes. That's a pet peeve of mine when they give Kong gorilla eyes. I don't like that. I like it when he has the human eyes. He was very expressive throughout the movie. Lots of cool expressions on the face of the monster. Towards the end, where basically Mighty Joe was becoming the hero of the story, where he was rescuing the little kids from the burning building. That scene was really well done. Unfortunately, the restored footage was a bit shaky. It was tinted. It was cool to see him climbing up the tree and the fire coming after him with the little girl in his hand, and it was very dramatic. Actually, there was a lot of drama in the movie. Acting was outstanding. Everybody was great. The young guy and the young girl were a little hokey, but I think they were supposed to be folksy. I thought they pulled it off great.
Robert Armstrong comes back. He is now Max O'Hare, who is very much a Carl Denham character.
He reprised that character basically in this movie. Maybe a little bit nicer. We're starting to shift into some of my complaints about the movie.
I think what you have with Max O'Hare, Carl Denham in Son of Kong.
Yeah.
There was a lot of crossover between creators here. One of the director, Shudasak, was one of the directors on Kong and Son of Kong. Willis O'Brien had his hand in this. It was mainly Ray Harryhausen's special effects, but Willis O'Brien clearly had a hand in it. He's even named. Miriam C. Cooper had the basic plot. Of course, Miriam C. Cooper is responsible for Kong and Son of Kong. I think here with Max, you're seeing the entire panoply of Carl Denham's story arc from the first two films. Completely self-centered and prideful in the beginning. This time, he actually rescues Mighty Joe Young instead of regretting what happened and then has Son of Kong save him before he dies.
Yeah, he did a great job stalling with the police, and he devised the plan on how to free Mighty Joe from the cell.
I think it is the weakest of the three because it doesn't have the monster fights. I mean, Joe has the scrap with the cowboys
and the lion. That
and
was
the lions.
Really cool. The lions.
He never kills the drunk that causes all the problem.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think you could have Joe kill anyone because what you're trying to do with him, but the lion could have eaten the guy.
Yeah. If we want to talk about genre, would you call this a horror movie?
This is not a horror movie.
No.
This is Western fantasy, adventure fantasy in Son of Kong. This is a Western fantasy. There's a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of...
Why do you call it Western?
Well, Western because of Tex.
Yeah, but I don't...
And the African ranch is very much a Western style ranch.
That's kind of a stretch, but I hear what you're saying. I mean, the cowboy guy was definitely very folksy, Norman Rockwell sort of cowboy. But I don't think the genre, because you got to have more than just that to make it a Western for me. Definitely, I agree with what you were saying. Adventure movie.
This film definitely had more of a kid aspect to it, like they wanted all ages to be able to see this movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. If you're picking up the film to see a King Kong horror movie, it's not going to do it for you. Mighty Joe felt more like a pet than a monster for a lot of the movie. Since that,
he was definitely a pet. Kong himself, of course, there was huge threat. Kong did all kinds of damage, killed all kinds of people. Son of Kong, there was a lot of death in it. Son of Kong wasn't really responsible for any of it, but it was clear that he could be a threat if he needed to be. Here with Joe, it was like you had a control. It reminded me of the X-Men when Professor X ran them in the beginning of the X-Men with the Lee Kirby stuff, where basically he had to tell them to do everything they did. Joe was like that. It was everybody's dream. If you're going to do it Kaiju style, I'd say he was kind of Giant Robo and Johnny Sacco situation.
I don't know why I was getting the Johnny Sacco vibe. I totally was feeling that, but it's not really a complaint. It's just my expectations were altered, as I was watching the movie.
The cowboy trying to round him up scene was brilliant. Nodded to in Valley of the Dinosaurs, where they have the cowboys versus a T-Rex. It's kind of nodded to this scene. Also done by Harryhausen.
And that leads into definitely my biggest complaint with this movie was in that scene, he was a big old giant. Not quite King Kong size, but he was big. Problem with this movie in terms of the special effects was the scale of the monkey just kept changing throughout the movie. And that was like, come on guys, you got Harryhausen. This is a big production. How are you screwing this up? I mean, you noticed it too. He got smaller when he was in the monkey cage. He was almost the size of a normal gorilla, But when they were trying
especially at the very end, when he's waving and that standing next to Greg, and he's only barely taller than him.
I know. At the very end, at the very last scene, absolutely. He was literally just a gorilla-sized gorilla. But you overlook it because the story's so fun.
Right. Special effects did look great. That scene when he's waving to Max at the very end looks great.
And it was cute.
But
and the expression on his face was really
it's just the fact of the matter is that was way too small. Now, the restored footage, to me, without the restored footage, the end is pretty lame. The restored footage, Mighty Joe Young and Greg and the girl are on their way to the dock.
They're fleeing for the life of the monkey.
And the cops have been kind of stuck in the dirt, and Max O'Hara is trying to stop them from shooting and all this kind of thing. That's where it would have ended without the restored footage.
Would have stopped abruptly.
And then you don't know whether or not they made it to the dock.
Right.
And then you get the very end bit where clearly they made it to the dock and they sent a video back and all this kind of thing. Supposed to have happened like a year or so after this. With the restored footage, you have Joe and them stop at an orphanage that's on fire.
While being chased by the police shooting it. Okay.
Yeah, they just couldn't resist to stop and save the day. So, Greg immediately breaks in there because hero, Roy Rogers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The goes in too. So Joe takes a hand. When he sees the girl go in, of course he's going to try to save her. Crawls up this tree, goes up to the top while the fire is on. It's a really great scene. Everything's falling around him. He saves the girl and opens the door so Greg can take these 3 children down with him going down the rope, kind of a thing. That stops him. But then when they get to the bottom, there's a little girl who's got to be 2 years old or whatever that they forgot. She's at the roof. Fire's going. Joe goes back up the tree, gets the girl. The tree catches on fire. Yeah. It breaks, and Joe takes the fall so that the girl won't. He cushions her fall. He's stunned. The girl walks up in front of the orphanage crying. The wall of the orphanage begins to fall on her. Joe jumps in the way and shields her again, knocks him senseless, but saves the girl. And Max O'Hara says that no one's going to shoot Joe now.
And that was the end of it.
And that's the end of that restored footage. It's one of, in my opinion, the best scenes in the movie.
It's definitely a great scene. However, I was feeling the tension of the chase scene. And they're rushing to get out to the pier because they want to get to Africa to save Mighty Joe Young from the police who are trying to kill Mighty Joe Young. When all of a sudden they stop fleeing because there's this random burning building and they want to go save the kids from the burning building. And it's like, wow, that's just kind of weird. It's just at the moment of it, because all the tension was in the chase, ending the chase. They're going to go rescue the. I expected the police to show up in the middle of that scene. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the police do, because Max shows up and Max is with the police.
Okay.
We don't see the police, but they do show up in the middle of the scene.
Yeah, okay.
Because they obviously saw Joe save the child. That's why Max says no one's shooting Joe now.
They should have had the police in there pointing a rifle at the guy and another police officer saying, no, don't do it. He's trying to save the kids or something like that. You know what I'm saying? I could see why they cut that scene just in terms of storytelling. It was random and contrived. It broke the tension, but just cutting the scene and then just jumping to
years later, or a year later, probably.
You know, and that's even worse. You know, they could have left the scene; it would have been a better movie. However, the burning building scene was super dramatic and it was awesome. It's kind of a scene that's going to stick with you. It was great, you know. So I'd have left it in.
Lieutenant, I'm Carl Denham. Carl Denham?
Denham? Oh, that's the man that captured the monster.
Well, Denham, the airplane's got him. Oh, no. It wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty killed the beast. Beauty killed